While there were protests of varying size happening all over the country, a planned protest in Maryland turned out to be a complete bust. According to reports, only about 3 people showed up to an event that was scheduled to start early this morning. Now, this is Brad Bell, the Maryland bureau chief for ABC News 7, and he had reported on Monday morning that there was absolutely no sign of any anti stay at home protesters that had been scheduled to start at 9 p.m. I'm sorry, 9 a.m. At Church Circle in Annapolis, Maryland, roughly a block from the Maryland State House. An hour later, Bell had reported that a total of 3 people had shown up to Church Circle to demand the immediate reopening of America's economy. Oops. Now there's reports of a few more people showing up, but generally, these protests are actually pretty small. I mean, you have collections of, few hundred people in states across the country, about 5 states total, that are ignoring social distancing measures and putting people in danger. Now, the thing about this that's frustrating is that while these protests are very small, you do see them getting the Tea Party treatment. Now, what do I mean by that? It means headlines that basically make this more important, these protests more important and seemingly bigger than they actually are. For example, you've got corporate media that's now writing headlines: "Conservatives fuel protests against coronavirus lockdowns." Well, in reality, it's actually a small group of fringe conservatives, as even most Republicans are complying with social distancing measures. There was another print headline, actually, that claimed the event was an indication that protests were sweeping the nation. They were sweeping the nation. Again, we've had in total of about 5 states. There were like 100 people in that most recent one. And now you also had a dozen protesters in Louisiana. You also had a couple thousand that did participate in a drive-by protest in Michigan, although most people stayed in their cars. And so you stay in your car, the window's up. Okay, well, that's fine. You're not really putting anybody in danger if you're staying in your car, which means practicing proper social distancing, right? Now, there was a couple of hundred people, about 200, that did leave their cars, that weren't in their cars. They were not wearing masks, most of them, and were not practicing social distancing, right? And so there is that distinction between the people that are practicing proper, for the most part, proper protest in the era of COVID-19, which I believe is fine. Everybody has a right to protest, even if they're wrong about what they're protesting against, which is the social distancing measures. But understandably, a lot of those people are probably afraid. And they've been told over and over again that the government's not going to come to help you. So you better get your bootstraps out and go back to work for your corporate overlords. Okay, fair enough, right? Look, they're just trying to feed their kids. And so I don't really have animosity towards those people. But the people who are mainly business leaders, corporate leaders, that are calling for, America to open up, well, a lot of them are at risk personally. It's their employees that'll be more at risk. And not only that, but their customers as well. So I have a problem with that, right? And that seems to be who is making up most of the protesters that are not, that are ignoring these social distancing rules. And so the problem is with the media, corporate media is propping these people up as if there's some sort of gigantic movement, right? And as representative of not only a conservative, but also in some cases a bipartisan movement that we should all have gigantic respect for. Well, reality shows otherwise, that they are neither a large portion of the American people or bipartisan in any sense of the word. They're mostly angry Trump supporters. In fact, ABC said the protests were moving coast to coast, but then said that there was a total of 5 states that held rallies over the weekend. That's 5 out of 50 states. On cable news, the word protesters has been mentioned more than 150 times since Friday, according to TV Eyes. So, but these protests, again, are super small. They're made up of incredibly fringe people. For example, there was an Austin protest earlier this morning. Guess who the main attraction was? Alex Jones. Alex Jones is out there calling this pandemic a hoax. A week from now, Alex Jones will probably be in the hospital. I'm just saying. Usually, if you're out there calling something a hoax, and we can point at a couple different examples of this. For example, UK PM Boris Johnson. He's like, oh, coronavirus, not really a problem here. I'm going to go and shake people's hands. In fact, I am proud of shaking people's hands. Oh, then he goes to the hospital because he got coronavirus. Now, he recovered, and hopefully he actually learned something from this. But again, he's a conservative, so probably not. Or then again, to be fair, conservatives usually learn something when they're personally affected. So now that Boris Johnson had been personally affected, maybe he's like, oh, this turns out this thing's actually kind of a big deal. Oops. I had no idea, even though medical professionals and people on the left were telling us that it's a big deal and we should be worried about it. Yeah. And so not only that, but there's some tragic ones too, where there are certain pastors who are out there saying, I'm covered in the blood of Jesus. I'm going to be protected from the coronavirus. It ain't going to touch me. That have then died from coronavirus. And so, look, I don't mean to make fun of the guy. I really, really don't, because he had family and friends. But that's the attitude that gets people killed. That gets people infected. And so that is a huge, huge problem. And a lot of that, of course, is how the media treats this. Now, the president also deserves a fair bit of blame for this, because he's out there saying we should have big get-togethers for Easter. Not really a big deal. He was out there saying that for quite some time. Now, I mean, he still really wants to open up the country, but so far, look, he's going on Twitter and saying two different things, right? So his administration released some very sensible guidelines on when states can open up, and it literally is left at the state's discretion, right? And when to do so once they've hit certain criteria. But then on Twitter, he's like, liberate Michigan, liberate Pennsylvania. And so, he's egging this on, and he's getting people to get out of their house and to put themselves and other people in absolute danger, right? And so that's a problem, right? But anyway, as far as the media is concerned, okay, well, first, the American people, 81% of Americans support stay-at-home measures, right? 60% believe coronavirus is a major threat to the country. And yet the media wants to prop up right-wing movements and ignore left-wing ones. So thankfully, the trust in the media right now is incredibly low. And yet more people are listening to people like Dr. Fauci, who are saying you should stay home and practice the social distancing in order to not spread the virus. And so, yay, credit for, the American people, right? Now, as far as the media is concerned, again, there's a history of media propping up the right wing and fawning over them in media coverage. Take Occupy Wall Street, right? So Occupy Wall Street is a left-wing movement, right? And the anti-war rallies that happen all around the world in the lead up to the Iraq War. Did the media cover them? No, barely covered. Now, look at the scale, right? 10 to 15 million people had marched in 600 cities back in 2003 in the lead up to the Iraq War. 10 to 15 million people. Did the media cover that? Not really. Did it get a lot of attention? No. At least 500,000 people protested in American cities, including New York, LA, and Seattle. No coverage, barely any coverage. Now you get the Tea Party movement, right? The American media looks at that and goes, that's a real movement. Yes, cover it. Send as many reporters as you can. There's literally a dude wearing a tricorn hat. We need to send 14 reporters to cover it now. Now. We must devote all coverage to them. Oh, we've got gigantic anti-war movements? Pfft, don't care. Don't care. Come at me when there's real news. Don't believe me? Here's an example. In 2010, when the Republicans used Tea Party rallies as part of the midterm election cycle, the three television networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, devoted 666, I'm not lying, 666 minutes of nightly news coverage to the Tea Party movement. Now, in 2018, the Democrats, right? So the Democrats ran this campaign against Donald Trump, and it actually was legislatively effective in making sure, the House, the Democrats gained a majority in the House. And so that was incredibly effective. How much media coverage did that get? Just 247 minutes. That was an effective Democratic resistance-led movement, right? And so, look, I've had my criticism of the resistance, how didn't really resist a whole lot. But in this case, this was a people-led movement in order to replace Republicans to get control of the House of Representatives. And that was incredibly effective. You had a lot of progressives that ended up winning their races and getting into the House as well. And in other places, other big wins. And so that was a Democratic blue wave. Barely got any coverage compared to what? The Tea Party protests. Now, look, the Tea Party protests were also actually pretty successful in getting Tea Party Republicans elected to office. And let's be fair. Fair is fair, right? But they had a massive, massive media advantage compared to the Democrats. So understand the playing field is not exactly equal, right? And it's not like we're talking about Fox News only. No, this is ABC, NBC, and CBS. This is supposedly the liberal media talking about Tea Party protests. Now, the media has a major hard-on for right-wing movements that are incredibly small and not representative. Remember, the Tea Party movement was incredibly astroturfed, right? It started out as a rant on CNBC by Rick Santelli, right? And he was mad at Obama. Oh, the economy under Obama is going to look like Cuba. Did that happen? Absolutely not. No. But here's the thing. The media respects money. They will only respect people with money. These super small protests, just like what happened during the Tea Party protests, are being promoted by very, very rich people. Mother Jones points out that the coverage, in their coverage of the Michigan protests, that the whole charade was facilitated by the Michigan Conservative Coalition, a conservative political group that doubles as a front for the Michigan Trump Republicans and promoted by the Michigan Freedom Fund, a conservative group with ties to Betsy DeVos. She put in a lot of money into that Michigan Conservative Coalition, and of course, they were able to astroturf and get these protesters out. The media only responds to the will of wealthy right-wingers. Only their concerns justify media attention. You can have a massive left-wing movement, but it's not going to get any coverage because the media is, the media is pro-establishment, pro-business, pro-corporate because it is a corporation. And things like the Tea Party, which, call for less taxes on corporations, well, the media eats it up because they're a corporation too, and they love paying less taxes. It's all about money, man. It's all about money. And this, of course, sends the message that only the right wing are the ones that actually matter, when in reality, the right wing is a fringe minority. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on and you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.